A man buys an old photograph for a couple dollars and doesn't think twice. Then he zooms in and realizes he may be staring at a face Americans have spent a century trying to prove. That's when the photo stops being a photo. It becomes evidence, and in some cases, it becomes worth millions. John Quincy Adams, a daguerreotype held for 175 years. Some photographs gain value because they capture famous people. This one gained value because it came from the first era of photography itself. In 1843, John Quincy Adams sat for a daguerreotype. Back then, photography didn't work like it does now. There were no copies, no negatives. Each image was a one-of-one object. If it was lost, it was gone forever. And for nearly 175 years, this daguerreotype stayed in private hands, hidden from public view, until it finally resurfaced at auction, and the significance hit instantly. This wasn't just a portrait. It was one of the earliest known photographic images of an American president. Not painted, not imagined, photographed from life. A moment preserved at the dawn of the medium. And when a one-of-one survives that long, its value doesn't rise because of hype. It rises because history doesn't give you a second chance. But the next photograph didn't become valuable because it was rare. It became valuable because it made a nation look at what it wanted to ignore. Dorothea Lange's Migrant Mother, a photo that changed what America admitted. In the 1930s, Dorothea Lange was documenting the Great Depression. This wasn't a personal project. It was part of a massive effort to record what Americans were living through. One day, she photographed a mother with her children. The mother's face was tired. Her eyes weren't posing for the camera. They were surviving. At the time, it was another image in a long day of work. But later, historians realized something. This photo didn't just show poverty. It showed what poverty does to a person. And it became one of the most recognizable documentary photographs in American history, because it made suffering visible in a way numbers never could. That's when value changes form. Not only monetary value, cultural value, the kind of value that makes an image permanent. Reproduced in textbooks, displayed in museums, referenced for decades. And once an image becomes the face of an era, it becomes one of the most valuable photographs ever taken because nothing else can replace it. But scarcity can also happen in a different way, not from time, from accident. The D-Day negatives, the war photos that almost disappeared. In June 1944, photographer Robert Capa landed with Allied forces on D-Day. He wasn't watching from a distance. He was on the beach, shooting roll after roll under live conditions. The photographs weren't staged. They were captured as history unfolded in real time. But then something happened that almost erased the entire record. The film was rushed to a darkroom, and in minutes, most of it was destroyed. A single mistake nearly erased the only photos taken from inside D-Day. Only a small number survived, and those surviving frames became some of the most famous war photographs ever published. Not because they were perfect, but because they were rare. Because you can't reshoot D-Day. If those frames disappear, the visual record disappears with them. That accident turned a handful of surviving images into cultural artifacts, and it revealed one of the strangest truths in photography. Sometimes value is created not by what was captured, but by what was almost lost, which makes the next story especially unsettling, because this photo became valuable for the opposite reason. Not because it was rare, but because it spread so far that people stopped questioning it. The surgeon's photo, the image that built a legend, then collapsed. In April 1934, a photograph appeared in the British press. It showed what looked like a long neck rising from dark water, the Loch Ness Monster. And the photo didn't need to be clear. In fact, the graininess made it believable. Then came the detail that changed everything. It was said to come from a surgeon, a respectable man, a professional. That one detail gave the photo credibility. And once the public accepted it, the image spread across the world. Books printed it, newspapers reran it, documentaries replayed it. The photo became one of the most reproduced mystery images in modern history. And that reproduction created value, because the image wasn't just an image anymore, it became a symbol. But decades later, investigators began digging into the origin story, and the conclusion became hard to avoid. The monster was likely staged, a hoax. The photo didn't just create belief, it revealed how belief works. And even after the myth collapsed, the image stayed valuable, not because it proved a monster existed, but because it proved something else. That a single photograph can reshape the world, even when it isn't true. And the final story proves it in the most haunting way, because the photographer survived, and the ship didn't. The Titanic photos that survived by accident. At first, these were just travel photos. In 1912, a young Irish priest named Father Francis Brown was on board the RMS Titanic. He wasn't documenting history, he was documenting a trip. He took photographs of passengers on deck, the dining areas, the staircases, quiet moments in the corridors. The ship looked calm, almost luxurious. And then something strange happened. Brown was supposed to continue the voyage. But before Titanic left Queenstown, he received a message that pulled him off the ship at the last moment. He stepped onto land, and he kept his camera negatives. Days later, Titanic sank, and suddenly those ordinary snapshots became something else entirely. They weren't souvenirs anymore. They were some of the clearest surviving images of what the Titanic actually looked like, from the inside, right before it disappeared. For decades, Father Brown's Titanic photos remained known mostly to archives and historians. But as Titanic became one of the most studied disasters in modern history, the photographs grew in importance. Because they weren't dramatized, they weren't movie sets. They were real. A calm ship, real people. A world that had no idea what was coming. And that's what makes them powerful. The value came later, not because someone tried to make them important, but because they accidentally became one of the last visual records of a place that no longer exists. A floating city, saved by a message that told one man to step off the boat. The $2 thrift store photo that shook the Wild West. It started in a small antique shop in Fresno, California. No museum, no auction house, no security glass, just a stack of old tintypes sitting like scrap. In 2010, a collector named Randy Guijarro bought a few of them for about $2. They looked like ordinary Western-era snapshots. A group of men gathered near a barn, some holding mallets, a casual game of croquet. Nothing about it looked famous, but later at home, Guijarro did what almost nobody does. He studied the faces, not quickly, carefully. And one man in the photo felt wrong. Not because he stood out, because he didn't. He looked like he belonged there, but the more Guijarro stared at him, the more one thought kept returning. That face looked familiar, so he pulled up the only widely authenticated photograph of Billy the Kid. And he started comparing the jawline, the posture, the eyes, and slowly the idea became hard to shake. This might not be a random croquet photo, it might be Billy the Kid, standing in plain sight, during a normal afternoon. Not on horseback, not holding a gun, just there. If true, it would be one of the rarest Wild West discoveries ever made, because almost nothing visual of Billy the Kid survives. The photo was examined by experts, and suddenly the photo wasn't a souvenir anymore. It was being treated like evidence. But the real reason this story works isn't the price. It's the feeling it creates, that one of the most famous outlaws in American history might have been hiding inside a perfectly normal photo the entire time. And once you see that, you start wondering what else is hiding in the world's forgotten images. Which brings you to the next story, because in this one, the photographer didn't even know she was making history. Vivian Maier's photos, the archive nobody knew existed. This didn't begin in a gallery. It began in a storage locker. In 2007, a set of boxes filled with negatives and undeveloped film was sold off in Chicago, not because someone wanted them, because the locker owner had fallen behind on payments. Inside were thousands of images, unlabeled, unpublished, unseen. At first, they didn't look like a discovery. They looked like clutter. But once people began scanning the negatives, something became obvious immediately. These photos were good, not casually good, artist-level good. The photographer was Vivian Maier, a nanny who spent decades taking street photographs across Chicago, New York City, and beyond. During her lifetime, she wasn't famous. No exhibitions, no interviews, no recognition. The people around her had no idea she'd quietly documented American city life for years. But when historians and critics finally saw the work, they realized what had happened. Maier hadn't just taken pictures, she'd built a time capsule. Faces, neighborhoods, small everyday scenes that didn't feel important until the cities changed. The images stayed still. The world moved on. And that gap, that time gap, is where value is born, because once those moments disappear, the photographs become the only way back. And Maier isn't the only one. Another image sat misfiled for years until researchers realized what it actually was. The daguerreotype found in plain sight, Dolly Madison's lost portrait. This one wasn't bought for $2. It was almost overlooked for something even more common. A small old portrait, misfiled, barely discussed, easy to miss. For years, it existed without the attention you'd expect for a major piece of American history. Then researchers realized what they were looking at. A daguerreotype identified by historians as one of the earliest known photographic images of a U.S. First Lady, Dolly Madison, a person who existed mostly in paintings, engravings, and written records, suddenly appearing in one of photography's earliest forms. The reason it mattered wasn't just who it showed, it was when it was made, because daguerreotypes are one-of-one objects, no negatives, no duplicate prints. If it disappears, the image disappears with it. And when the portrait finally went to auction, bidding exploded. It sold for far more than expected, and it was acquired by the Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery. That's the moment the photo's value became obvious. Not because it was beautiful, because it was irreplaceable. A real face from a distant century, preserved on a single piece of metal. And the next story pushes that same idea even further, because it isn't just rare, it's unique. Most photos get forgotten, but the rare ones don't disappear. They wait. Some sit in boxes, some hide in archives, and some only make sense decades later. If you want more true stories like this, subscribe to Rapid Rank.